It's Kara.
That's what I told Kelly Jackson, but she wasn't paying any attention to me. Kara Spencer, St. Louis Board of Aldermen. Welcome to Big 550 KTRS.
Thanks for having me.
How was the traffic?
It was lovely, nice and slow. You know, I didn't go too fast.
So did you drive your car or did you take your Vespa out here?
My Vespa is in the shop, so I took my car.
Oh, your Vespa's in the shop. Oh, boy.
It's actually a Honda, but that's all right.
Oh, okay. All right. Now, who are you suing? What's the latest with this thing?
Well, you know, what we're doing is we are suing to have a judge take a look at the funding package that we put together this spring to upgrade the Scottrade Center. And what we're doing here is looking at the legality of the funding package that was specified by ordinance through the Board of Aldermen in February.
Okay, remind people, this was passed by the Board of Aldermen.
It was.
You voted against it.
I did.
Okay. And it was signed by the mayor.
It was signed by the then mayor.
Mayor Slay?
That's right.
Okay. And so this then, which said that we're gonna float the bonds, we're gonna fund the bonds and whatever else.
Here's
right?
what we did. Here's what we did. So, you know, you may remember as last session was ending, there were a flurry of packages that came through. One of which was this funding package for Scottrade Center, and it's no small matter. I mean, this is $106 million upgrade that we're looking at.
Right.
And, you know, it came through the Board of Aldermen, got a little bit of play, but not a lot. We didn't have all the facts and figures in front of us. And what that bill did was it essentially shifted the responsibility for maintenance and upgrade from the Blues and the hockey ownership to the city of St. Louis. But the problem was, first of all, that was not made clear to any of us. We didn't have the lease. We didn't understand where the responsibility lay. I mean, we're making major $106 million decisions without the lease.
Okay.
I mean, it's ludicrous.
Okay, assuming all of that is 100% true, you hear this often. You hear this down in Jefferson City. You hear this. We passed the bill, but we didn't know what was in it. How can that be?
You know, it's crazy to me. And I spoke about it. I was open about it. I requested that documentation. We didn't have it. It's nothing short of insane to pass major legislation regarding a leasing structure without the actual lease.
But still no excuse that it's passed and signed just because you didn't know what was in it and voted for it. How can a judge say, sorry, you guys didn't read it, so therefore it's no good?
Well, sure. But that's not actually what we're asking the judge to take a look at. The Missouri State Constitution is very clear, and what it states is that cities do not have the authority, cannot actually allocate tax dollars to for-profit entities for which they have no control and no direct benefit. So that's what we're doing here. So for example, if I've got a coffee shop in my neighborhood, make great coffee. They bring people in from all over the world. It is the best, you know, they are performing on a national level, best coffee.
Right.
And they come to me and say, Kara, look, we generate tax dollars. We make this neighborhood, this city a destination. We want to do a little bit more. We're going to need a new espresso machine. We'd like some luxury tables for our patrons to sit at and a new bathroom facility.
Right.
Okay, can you give us $1 million tax dollars? You know, we're going to generate some additional sales tax, et cetera, for you. Absolutely not. It is against state constitution for cities to put money into for-profit entities like that. And much the same way, it is illegal for the city of St. Louis to fund the upgrade of Scottrade, for which we have no control. We have no direct input, and it is a for-profit entity for which we do not see direct proceeds.
But doesn't the city do this all the time? Didn't they give money to Laclede Gas to move 3 blocks down the road? Don't you give tax incentives for all sorts of companies to move into the city and tax breaks and everything else?
Well, those are tax breaks. That is very, very different than the city handing we're bonding out $64 million. But that's handing money directly over. And the argument made was this.
But you're paying off the bonds.
We're paying off the bonds over 30 years.
So the money's not going, it's a technicality. The money's not going straight to the Blues.
Oh, it is. Yes.
Well, it's going indirectly to the Blues.
How so?
Well, if you're paying off the bonds, I buy a bond on Wall Street. That money goes to the Blues. Then the city pays me back the bonds.
The city, look.
Right? So, I mean, you're not writing a check to the Blues for $64 million. You're writing a check to the bondholders.
Sure, but the bondholders are writing a check for $64 million to the Blues.
Right, I understand that.
Directly. I mean, goes directly to them. Look, listen, here was the argument made. We own the building.
Yes.
Well, let me tell you, when we own a building and we make upgrades to it,
yes,
and you use tax dollars for it, guess what happens? It goes through the Board of Public Service. It goes through a fair and open bidding process. Anytime you use tax dollars for an upgrade of a facility, paving a street, paving an alley,
Right.
it has to go through a fair and open bidding process, and it has to go through the Board of Public Service. But what we're doing is just handing money over to a for-profit entity that has no public oversight, and they don't have any fair and open bidding. They just get to do, order whatever contracts they want with
Right.
no public oversight. These are public dollars. These are tax dollars, and we have a responsibility to taxpayers to make sure this is done fairly. Look, I don't want to see these upgrades stop. Understand that the hockey ownership has already started.
Right.
We want to see Scottrade be the #1 sports facility in the world.
right.
But we also want to see soccer. We also want to see NBA. If we don't have a realistic, responsible funding mechanism for this and other regional amenities, we're never going to see these major.
Hold on. You want soccer?
Look, I want to see the city of St. Louis have every amenity for every type of visitor and every type of resident that we could imagine. Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
Hold on. Hold the soccer thing for a second, because it's somebody who looked just like you, sat in the seat that just looked like that, was complaining about the soccer stadium.
I was complaining about the city going at it alone. Listen, I played soccer all through high school. I think we talked about it last time I was
Right.
here. I was a great player. I got.
I was tremendous. In my own head, I was a great player.
I got the 110% award.
I was a terrible player, but I still want soccer. It doesn't matter how good or bad you
That's
are.
exactly right. The point is, it's a great sport. I had a lot of fun. A lot of kids play it. We want to see these sort of regional amenities, but we cannot have the city of St. Louis going at this alone. We are 300,000 people of a
Right.
region of 3 million.
I think a lot of people would agree with that.
We're 10% of the entire region, and I hate to admit this, but we're the poorest portion of the region.
No question. No, all of that is true, and I think most people would agree with that.
We're the most challenged, and this last year we had a $17 million deficit. We had to cut every single department in the city to balance the budget. Now we're going to add on top of it a $4.5 million obligation, for which we in January didn't have. That obligation was very clearly on the shoulders of hockey ownership, and we shifted it without any transparency. We made a privately financed facility. We shifted it to be a publicly financed facility without a single vote.
I'll go
crazy.
one step further. The city also deals with all of the social ills of the entire community.
Of the entire region.
The drug addicts go downtown
Yeah.
into the city. The drug dealers go into the city. The crime is, just because you're born in Ellisville, you commit a crime in the city, that's put on the city.
Yep.
You have decaying old infrastructure that has to be taken care of. You've got lead in the buildings and in the schools. If you're born in St. Charles and you become homeless, you don't hang out in downtown St. Charles. You hang out in downtown St. Louis.
That's exactly right.
And that puts a major strain on the city's resources. Nobody's arguing that. But in this instance, remind us, it was Prop 1 or Prop 2, right? The Prop 2 failed to build the soccer stadium, but the Prop 1 raised the taxes for the soccer stadium.
Yeah, so...
And that part of that Prop 1 was also money raised for the Scottrade Center, and that passed, right?
No. Prop 1 had nothing. There was
nothing to do with the Scottrade Center.
In fact, here's the problem with Scottrade. There is no mechanism to pay for it.
So this is
Zero.
General revenue you're paying off
General
the bonds.
revenue.
Right.
General revenue. Right off the top. Right now, if you live in the city, your garbage is probably not collected regularly. You've got an alley that needs to be paved. We're going to skim right off the top $4.5 million and figure out where that's going to come from. I have no idea.
But what signal does this say to a business who wants to cut a deal with the city, who passes a bill through the alderman, signed by the mayor, and then somebody reneges and you're halfway finished with the building and the city pulls back?
Listen, that business came before the Board of Aldermen and said over and over and over again, listen, city, this is your responsibility to upgrade. But that is not true. In fact, that business was very aware of what the lease stated. Now, they didn't share that with us at the time, and we didn't have that information, but they were keenly aware. And if they weren't, shame on them. That's a lease. They should understand their leasing agreements. It was very clear in the lease, this is their responsibility. They look, this was a shift, a major shift of responsibility. When they took over that entity, they were aware that their responsibility was to maintain and upkeep and upgrade that facility. Mm-hmm. And they chose to go before the Board of Aldermen and ask for tax dollars to do what was their responsibility.
Right. I get it.
Very little sympathy for that.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. That's not the argument I think I'm making. I think the argument I'm making is you guys, even though you voted against it, passed it. Mm-hmm. And it was signed by the mayor. Mm-hmm. And so all of those things should have been handled beforehand. And if the Board of Aldermen signs off on this terrible bill, mm-hmm. and it's going to downgrade our credit and everything else, it's already out there. You've already passed it. Mm-hmm. So whose fault is it that the Board of Aldermen wasn't watching the till?
Well, I don't know. I mean, whose fault is it when you have people coming before a deliberative body and stating things that are essentially not true?
Are you saying the Blues lied to the city?
I'm saying that the Blues came before the Board of Aldermen and said that it was the city's responsibility to upgrade the facility. And in reading the lease, which we got after we passed that ordinance, it is very clear that that is just not true.
But you still passed the bill anyway.
Under false premise, absolutely. It was passed under false premise, and that false premise was handed to us by the very people that were looking to pass it. Now, I don't think it was. I'm not claiming that there was malintention here.
Well, that's exactly what you're saying.
But it was. I
mean, you're saying they were intentionally deceptive, and then saying I'm not saying they're intentionally deceptive.
The people that came before us, I'm not sure if they had specifically or personally read the lease. There's a possibility that they didn't. Look, they're looking out for their best interests, and I don't blame them. I mean, we want to see the hockey team succeed here in St. Louis. I do too.
So what happens? What happens if the judge rules that this is the city doesn't have to float these bonds? What happens now?
Well, if the judge rules, look, this is an unconstitutional use of public dollars,
right,
then what we need to do, and we're starting to do this right now, is find another funding mechanism. Look, they've already started the work. We want to see this be successful. There's many other ways we can structure this. A regional taxing entity. We already have a regional sports authority mm-hmm. that can take in regional tax dollars, a ticket tax, an additional tax on the users who are using the Scottrade Center.
Right.
There are lots of ways to fund the upgrade of a facility like this.
But all of that could have been debated before you passed the
Agreed.
bill.
So
why wasn't it debated before all this came down?
This is a great question. During final deliberations, I put forward a motion to throw it back to committee to come up with a funding mechanism that didn't take money out of general revenue, that was net neutral, and to get all of the documentation. Why my colleagues voted against that, I don't know.
Right.
And I thought it was ludicrous.
Does Darlene Green have the right to withhold this?
In my opinion, she does, and according to her legal counsel. So you may know that the Blues filed a countersuit. Look, our credit rating has dropped twice in the last 18 months.
Right.
That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And she has indication that signing off on these will further degrade our credit rating. And the city really honestly cannot sustain that. I mean, look, we have less than $16 million in the bank. We're not sitting on a pile of money here. And the obligations here are greater than the entire savings account for the city of St. Louis.
How much do you blame, or where does Mayor Slay come into all this? This was the end of his administration. He was very powerful. Lyda Krewson voted against it. She's now the mayor. Where does all this play into that?
That's a good question. I don't think anybody in particular is to blame. I mean, this exercise isn't about, villainizing anybody, the Blues or Mayor Slay, for example, but it is about finding a better solution. We need to be solution-oriented here so that we can go ahead and figure out a way to get this done and figure out a path to have other big major infrastructure projects built in the region of the city of St. Louis for all of our citizens here.
How long is it going to take for the judge to rule?
That's a good question. It could take a long time. That's why I'm really hoping that we have some folks come to the table and find a new solution.
Are you talking to the Blues at all?
Well, they know where to find me. My cell phone number's out there.
Last question for you, Kara Spencer, not Cara Spencer, St. Louis Board of Aldermen. And that is this. Let's go back to this Prop 1, Prop 2, plus this soccer stadium. Prop 1 had a tax on out-of-state businesses, right?
So Prop 1 was a sales tax,
right?
Half-cent sales tax. That half-cent is charged when you go to the store or when you buy
right, whatever, right?
Exactly, and there is a resulting use tax, which is charged on businesses. Okay. So that is a similar half-cent. It's only charged on businesses, and it's kind of allocated a little bit differently than the sales tax.
And that money was supposed to go to build the soccer stadium.
Correct.
But Prop 2 was, do you want us to build the soccer stadium? That failed.
That's correct.
So the tax to build the soccer stadium passed.
It's still out there. That's right.
And
it's
is being collected.
That's right.
But you're not going to take it to build the soccer stadium.
That's correct.
So where is that money going to go that was supposed to be allocated for a soccer stadium?
It hasn't been allocated yet. So when that failed, the Board of Aldermen hasn't been back in session since that time.
Right.
And
where should it go?
It's a good question. I mean, we have a lot. It's a sales tax. I mean, it's a regressive tax, which means that it affects the poorest among us.
But it passed.
It did pass. The Prop 1 passed, which means there is a resulting half-cent use tax, about $4 million a year,
right,
of sales tax. Do I think we should use sales tax to upgrade sports facilities? I mean, if that's the question you're kind of going down, that's a question for the voters.
But you told the voters the money was going to go to the soccer stadium.
Well, and they voted against it.
The voters gave you two different answers, right? They wanted to fund the stadium. They didn't want to. They didn't want you to build the stadium.
No. Prop 1 was specific. It was called the Metrolink tax. I mean, it was pegged as such, and it was publicized as such. I mean, I think the voters voted to expand the public transit system in the city of St. Louis.
Well, but I could also argue that they voted to fund the stadium.
Well, you're right.
Because it was on there.
Well, you're right. That's a good point. But at the same time, I think that voters in the city don't want to see the city go at these major regional assets alone. And I don't think they should. We've really got to figure out a way to work together here to come up with a regional solution for Scottrade and soccer. We've got, we can start to think about recruiting NBA basketball.
Let me ask you this question before you bring in an NBA team. Are any talks with anybody associated with the MLS group for a stadium funding, anything like that?
Any talks?
Yeah. Did you hear anything?
Yeah,
any
there's
rumblings?
some rumblings. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, there are rumblings.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's not a lot of details at this point, but
there are rumblings.
There are rumblings.
So it's not, the soccer stadium's not totally dead.
No, I don't think it's totally dead, and I don't think it should be. I mean,
even though you came here and wanted to vote against it.
Listen, I was against the package that was before us. It wasn't a regional package, and again, it was putting a regional asset, funding it only through the city residents, and that's a mistake.
That's Kara Spencer. She's the St. Louis Board of Aldermen, Ward 20. She's full of... I want to be careful. You're full of energy.
I'm full of energy.
You're full of energy.
That's
You're part of the new young guns with the Board of Aldermen.
That's right.
You're always welcome here. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.